Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Our guest today has worn many hats over the past 50 years in Vermont. He's a former manager of Shelburne Farms. He served on the State Water Resources Board, the Housing Conservation Board, as well as the board of the Vermont Land Trust. He did all that while running his own dairy farm in the town of Cornwall, where he continues to serve on the select board. Last month, John Roberts was appointed to serve as state director of the USDA's Farm Service Agency, or FSA. And separately, he was awarded one of the highest honors in Vermont agriculture. John joins us this afternoon via Zoom. Welcome, John, and congratulations as the new state director of the FSA.
Well, thank you, Fran. Yes, it's a bit of a daunting experience, but I'm happy to do it.
Well, it's great that you've taken it on. And the Farm Service Agency is well known, of course, to farmers, but perhaps not so well known to the general public. What does the FSA do?
That's a very good question. And the FSA is one of the branches under the umbrella of the United States Department of Agriculture, which, include rural development, include the Natural Resources Conservation Service. FSA in particular is the way funds are funneled to the farmers in the rural community to provide loans, to provide disaster funding, to provide commodity programs, support programs, and of course, under the pandemic, which hopefully we are gradually coming out of, a huge amount of pandemic relief funding.
So mainly federal funds, basically. And what does that look like in Vermont?
Well, it looks pretty impressive in Vermont. We do things like, so first of all, there's the loan program. My wife and I bought our first farm in Cornwall in those days, it was called the Farm Home Administration. And, it's gone through several iterations, even in my lifetime. But it started back then in the early 1980s. We got a loan through FHA to buy our first farm, very low interest. They have these young farmer programs. So loans are a big part of what they do. They either directly give loans or guarantee loans through other lending institutions for farmers. Then there's disaster relief, and we've seen a big part of that with the CFAP program, and there are a huge number of acronyms. It's just mind-boggling, to be honest, the number of acronyms. I'm not sure I even can say what they are, but under COVID relief is basically what CFAP was or is. And the last 2 years, we've delivered close to $80 million to farmers in supporting commodities, maple, vegetables, crops, livestock, dairy, eggs, and, various other payments. It was like $35 million in the last year. There's also a pandemic assistance to timber harvesters and traders and haulers, that was about 1.9, not a huge amount of money. When you start talking up in the millions, you sort of glibly say 1.9, it's not a huge amount of money. Yeah, it is a huge amount of money. But we didn't have We didn't have quite the sign up for that might have.
And spread throughout the state. I mean, you have, nine
Yes.
county offices and 50 employees that help you do this and work with farmers and foresters, et cetera, right?
Yes, we actually have 40. We are allowed 41 employees.
Ah.
We do have 9 offices around the state. And there's not one in every county. There are some counties that are combined. And I'm going to put a quick plug in here, since we're talking about offices, that we have vacancies. We have jobs available. These are good jobs with tremendous benefits. And if anybody's interested, please go to usjob.gov and you will find a link to Vermont in there. But we have some great jobs that are, either in the loan program or the other programs. It's just basic programs, which include all these other things we do.
Well, let's talk about your programs some, because nationwide FSA offers more than a dozen programs. Which ones are most heavily utilized in Vermont, and probably where you're looking to fill some of these jobs?
Well, so first of all, there's the loan. That's kind of separate. But the main ones in Vermont that we use are like the Dairy Margin Coverage Program, the CREP, Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, which enables farmers to get or landowners to get a payment for putting land out of production and into, say, trees, valuable plantings. And they are required to keep them in those programs or in trees for 15 years. And they can be renewed, and they get paid an annual rent. We have the CRP program, Conservation Reserve Program, which covers a whole range of other conservation programs. And it's sort of an avenue for much of the climate smart farming money that is going to come out of Washington, trying to emphasize the importance of that farmers have in their role in supporting changes to the climate and improvements to the climate. Some of those programs have yet to be developed, but they are in the process. We have farm storage facility loan programs that are quite heavily used. We had an interesting example the other day of a greenhouse project up in northern Vermont, where not only were they doing hydroponic growing of vegetables, but they were using the water underneath was raising fish, tilapia, but the tilapia were not really there as a commodity to sell. It's basically they wanted the tilapia poop to fertilize
the water.
Vegetables. So it's an interesting and very interesting project. FSA does those, and we try to be creative about those sort of programs.
That's fabulous, and I know that the water is close to your heart. But I want to be, because the deadline is this Friday for the Dairy Margin Coverage Program. Just quickly, what does that program do if somebody wants to sign up?
Okay, so the Dairy Margin Program provides a payment to farmers. It measures the differential, the margin between what farmers are getting for their milk and what it's costing them to produce that milk. So feed costs and fuel costs, etc., all go into that. So it's that margin. And I would really encourage all dairy farmers to think seriously about signing up, particularly now that there is a proposal. I'm not sure whether Governor Scott has signed it yet, but there is a proposal in the state's budget plan to help refund the premium, the basic premium for dairy farmers. So, with the war in Ukraine, which is going to further skew the cost of production in the wrong direction. even though the price of milk is looking pretty robust, that margin may well be affected badly because of what's happening in Ukraine.
Right. So very briefly, what are the impacts? There's Russian fertilizer, energy issues. Quickly, those impacts.
A lot of fertilizer, phosphorus and potash comes from Russia. That is now shut off. Fuel is used to make nitrogen, gas, oil. That price has gone up dramatically. A lot of people do not know that Ukraine is one of the largest. It's bigger than France. And not only that, but it has a huge, high proportion of very high quality soil. Maybe this is what the Russians are partially after, but they have a significant impact on the world wheat market. And all of that filters through the global markets and will impact feed costs. And, not just, feed for humans, bread, etc., but also feed for cattle.
For cattle. So we have to keep our eye on that. I want to make sure we get to something very important today. So excuse me if you're just joining us. We're with John Roberts. He is the new state director of the USDA's Farm Service Agency. And he's also recently the winner of one of the highest awards in Vermont agriculture. The John C. Finley Award is named for the late Deputy Commissioner of Vermont Agriculture, who is pictured here. He was a respected educator who led efforts to diversify Vermont agriculture in the 60s and 70s. He worked to develop new ag enterprises and expand marketing. And the annual award is bestowed by the Vermont Dairy Industry Alliance. Congratulations, John Roberts, for this award. What does it mean to you?
Oh, well, Fran, first of all, I'm flabbergasted that they could make such a mistake as to give me the award. But it's a tremendous honor. I personally did not know John Finley. That was shortly after his demise, was shortly after I moved to the state and started farming on my own. But I have watched over the years, particularly at the dairy banquet at the farm show, the high level of people who've been given this award. So I'm deeply honored.
And that is you now. And for our audience who want to find out more about FSA, which you are running now, they can go to the website, www.fsa.usda.gov, or you can call the state offices in Colchester at 802-658-2803. John Roberts, congratulations, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Fran, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.